Of course, I'm still on this, and you know what? I probably won't get done tonight because while I was studying tonight, I thought, boy, I got a lot of things left. So I doubt seriously if I'll get done tonight. But I'll review just a couple of things from the beginning. That the intro in the 3rd chapter of 2 Timothy, verse 1 is, this know, and that this know, I was listening to a preacher that broke down those words and made it very clear. This is a directive, an instruction. It's not like, by the way, just in case you were wondering, it's a know this. Be instructed. Be aware. Know this. Paul's heart was so much, remember that passage in Acts where everybody's crying because they know he's leaving, and he shares how he's warning everybody with tears day and night. His heart is so full with, I see the dangers you guys can get yourself into, and please be careful, be careful, be careful, be careful. He's like Robert with his love language is watch out, be careful. Watch out, be careful. Robert will call me up after he's gotten to church. You know, it doesn't look like, this was last Saturday, it doesn't look like, but the middle lane of Leonard, while you turn for church, it's icy. And you know what? It was. It was. He's, watch out, be careful, be careful. Well, Paul's got the same heart right here, only it's even more serious. More serious, because he said, this know also that in the last days perilous times will come. And perilous, which I'm just reviewing a little bit, is hard to deal with, difficult, fierce, and it's the same word used when speaking of the demoniac in the Gadarenes. People didn't even want to go near that guy because he was so fierce and so strong. Like, let's avoid being in his space. That's perilous. There are people that are perilous. Perilous people. There's neighborhoods that you don't want to go in. I don't know about Grand Rapids, but I've heard stories about lines between the Crips and the Bloods, and if you're this, don't go here. If you're this, don't go there. And if you're neither one, but you're in my neighborhood, what are you doing in my neighborhood? Just fierce, protective, territorial. The same is to be said about the mobs over the years in Chicago and in New York City. Like, that's your square. These are your blocks. These are my blocks. What are you doing in my territory? Why are you selling things in my territory? Get out of my territory. It'll be fierce for you and bad for you. Well, it's the same way when we get on enemy territory. It's scary. If we go somewhere we have no business going and maybe a fight breaks out and maybe somebody hauls out a gun and you're like, I knew I shouldn't have been here in the first place. This is a perilous, perilous place. But the Bible says in the last days it's going to get worse and worse. It says that at the end, evil men will wax worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived. It'll get worse and worse. Hard to bear, grievous, rough, violent. In James 3, that word is used of the winds that James referred to, of winds being rough, fierce. And like I said, I'm reviewing at this second, but if you've ever seen the ocean, I've seen it where the waves were high and the sound was loud, and I realized that this would not be the time to go kayaking at all. It would be impossible. It would be utterly impossible because they're so high and so fierce. You don't go there. It's rougher than you are. So it just said that in the last days it's going to be like that. And it's funny because it's about humans, how humans are going to be. Today, in a headline on Drudge, and usually I am immune to, for whatever reason, I'm so looking forward to seeing Jesus that when they have all these threats and be enraged, be fearful, whatever seems to be the motive. Today I got hit with a little bit of a concern, like we got a gun to our head, because Putin is talking about he's got nukes that reach England and the United States. I don't know if you saw that same headline, but it's in the Drudge Report right now. And that hit me because Putin sounds like he's losing it, and it feels like he's on his last leg, and he's even his own leadership, some are defecting and say it's crazy. And they're talking too about the troops going to Ukraine, of how fierce the men have been with the raping and the looting and the I want this and I want that. That's not what that war is for, is it? So you can go in somebody else's country and rape their women and take their stuff? Is that what war is for? But evidently some of the soldiers are drunk on that kind of power, to want to do that. And that's a fierce, horrible thing. But we're not the first. If you read stories from times past, the people have weathered some pretty fierce, hard times. Don't forget, the perils, the root of it is sin. What Adam and Eve chose to do just kept snowballing until we're here where we are. And in the end, the outpouring of evil will be painful, grievous. Read Psalms 91. It gives us some comfort that if you dwell in the secret place, there's a lot of things that evil people will have to withstand that we want. Or I've read a lot of testimonies of people that face death. I was just listening to the Scottish church. Did I share with you that already? That, I don't know, it was 2 days ago, 3 days ago that I listened to that on tape, or saw a movie to that effect. But it was a historical representation of 1500s, 1600s, somewhere through there, where people realized, no, we're not going to be controlled anymore by the civil ruler who thinks he's over our conscience and our spiritual lives. We're going to, and then they got kicked out of their churches so they'd meet in the fields. And this is a Scottish Reformation kind of thing. And they get picked up, thrown in jail, tortured, killed. It was fierce. So there's been fierce times where people have had to stand on their faith at the price of death. And many of those guys were said to have been rejoicing as they were about to be hung, the same as the disciples, counting it joy that they're worthy to suffer for the name of the Lord. I think there's a special grace that we can have if, it's grace when we get hidden and survive, and it's grace when we don't survive physically, but we have so much joy. We feel honored to be chosen of God to suffer for his name's sake. I think no matter what happens, we in Christ will have grace for it. If we're in Christ, we better get in firm and true with all of our hearts, all of our hearts. So the last one I did was disobedient to parents. I dealt with that. Afterwards, Karen and Alexandra came up here together because they had looked up that contumacious. Remember I said I never heard that word before? So they both came up here and said in unison, contumacious, and gave the definition of it like a quiz show or something. It was so cute. But that's a word I hadn't heard before. But that part of being disobedient, the Strongs included that word. And stubbornly perverse or rebellious. You hear of these drug addicts that literally slap their grandma and steal money out of her purse to get drugs. Now that's fierce. That's perilous. And have the nerve to keep staying with that grandma or parent or whatever. It's just, that's a horrible thing. But I left off at that. And had you all heard that word contumacious before? I didn't know it. I can't even find Latin. I see the con, the with, but what's the tomb coming from? I don't know. But anyway, moving right along. I thought they were cute coming up afterwards. Unthankful would be the next one. Unthankful. It's a whole list of these are the symptoms of perilous times when people act in the following ways. And I'm going through that list, not only so that we discern it and stay away from around people, because it says, get away from around these people. It says it again in another verse I just picked up tonight. If I might not get there, but we'll see. But not just look at it like that. Look at it also as what's the opposite of it? As a directive of what we're supposed to be like, okay? And then, is it me? In that list, there might be a couple of things that we flirt with, and we didn't really think about it. And by flirt with, I mean kind of poke it around and see if we want to be a little bit like that particular trait. That's what I mean by that. I could probably find a better word, but I didn't. So I'm thankful. Have you ever given somebody something that they almost act like they were entitled to it and did not say a word of appreciation? And you feel funny, like You don't realize, as a matter of fact, all three of our moms, my Mary birth mom, my Cora adopted mother, and my mother-in-law, they all made us, what do you call those things? Afghans, those blankets. And they're still in our house, and the older I get, the more grateful I am for those hands that made those Afghans. When you first get them, you're not as appreciative to what it took. Is that what you're doing? You're making, oh, she makes those quotes, yeah. Me too. Uh-oh. Hello. Anyway, you want to immediately, you don't want to have a lag of about a decade before you realize what a gift that was. We want to be thankful and a full of appreciation and state appreciation for the things people do. And as a comfort to you, Joanne, maybe there's some other people like me. Now, I know Ben, when you did that to him, he was overwhelmed with gratitude, and he brings it up every now and again of what he felt when you did that. And that makes you want to go give Ben stuff. You know, it does. When somebody's really grateful, it makes you want to give them stuff, you know. But there might be some people like me who at 35 didn't see the value, but at 70, it's like, wow. I mean, you could be long in heaven before somebody goes, wow. That was really something, especially if they watch somebody make something like that. Or a meal. Do you realize what some women put, my mom, Cora mom, my adopted mom, who is my mom, do you realize what some women put into meals that they make you on a special occasion? Do you realize the time, the carefulness, and to go there and just eat it up without saying a word? That's a funny feeling. That people don't even notice that what they just had was a gift of love. Not that you do it for the thank yous, but when somebody's just crass, it is kind of cold. Go ahead, honey.
Speaking of Ben, while you were in Florida doing your book, working on your book, they brought me a whole dinner over.
Oh, I heard about it over and over for days.
One of the best steaks I've ever had in my life. I mean, they doctored that thing up, and I appreciate it.
Yeah. And Ben came home today, which is probably why he's not here right now. Yay. Lord, please touch him and heal him all the way. Lord, help Vicki to be able to take care of him and Mama and Rebecca and everybody else that they can take care of him. Is that where Cordell is too, seeing about Daddy at home? We don't know where Cordell is. Okay. I assumed. See what happens when you just assume? Anyway, the next one on the list is unholy. And that's, I don't know what to say, but it's just plain wicked. Wicked. Wicked people don't want to conform to the ways of the Lord. I had a brother, an adopted brother, he was charming and everybody loved him. Lovable is the word. Fun. But he was naughty. He was just naughty. And I used to cry over it because the parents said, you don't watch Cowboys and Indians, it's violent. We're talking in the 50s. Couldn't watch tobacco or alcohol advertisements. You had to turn to one of the other two channels that we had access to. And Carl disregarded my parents' rules. He was 7 years older than me. He disregarded. And I remember being grieved to my heart that my parents would make distinct, clear rules, and he would very blatantly disregard rules that my dad and mom made, and it hurt me. I was a very righteous little girl. When I was little, I wanted everybody to keep the rules. I really did. And when he did that, it hurt, but it does make for a perilous household. And I remember at times, maybe I was 5 and he was 12, and it might have been the last years of him taking him in the basin and spanking Carl. But I never remember Carl crying or yelling. But when I could hear the spank with his hand on his bottom where God created us to be spanked when we're children. And I remember hearing Carl yell, and I'd be upstairs crying and crying because Carl was getting a spanking. And I loved Carl. I loved him so much, but he was just, when he was in jail one time, they called us, the chaplain called us and said that Carl had received Jesus. I was so excited and so happy. I was wondering why nobody else was happy in the room. It was Christmas time, by the way. We had just gotten a new puppy, Cocker Spaniel, named Skippy, and I'm sitting with the dog and hearing that. I was in seventh heaven with a little puppy, and here my brother just received Jesus. But my mom and dad knew Carl, and their attitude was, we'll see. It wasn't all out negative and skeptical, but he was a people pleaser, and for the moment he was probably sincere. But the next person to please would be the guy he ran off to Tijuana with, and what can we find naughty to do in Tijuana? You know, that kind of thing when a couple years down the road. At any rate, they knew him. So they're like, that's nice, but don't get too excited. We know Carl. And there's people like that, you know. And he was just naughty. When he was in grade school, Mr. Meindertsman literally took a pliers to his ear and pulled it until it bled right there. He was trying so hard, and that wasn't right. He was trying so hard to get Carl to straighten up. Everybody loved him, and everybody wanted him to straighten up. He never did. He never went back to prison. He said when he went to prison for stealing some money, $500, forged a check, he said, I'll never go there again. And he didn't. He didn't. He found other avenues of expression than doing things that would land him in prison. But he never, okay, as far as I know, he was very prejudiced, so he didn't want to see my face anymore. And when he was dying, he told my sister, don't tell Rosemary. I don't want her to come and see me. So, well, that kind of indicates the heart, doesn't it? But that wickedness made our household hard. One day he was picking his tummy or something to get dust off him, and Dad told him to stop doing that at the table. And pow, he knocked Dad right off his chair. I went in the living room at that moment and cried my head off, because it felt like when your dad can't handle one of the kids. Dad's like 5'6", and maybe 150 pounds at that time. I'm not sure. He was like 120 when he was 16 on his license, 125. Carl's like 6'1". He knocked him down, and I felt like the world, that's treacherous, that's perilous, that's fierce. And to Dad's credit, or his big heart, he didn't report anything. He didn't call any cops or nothing. Dad's strategy with Carl was, yeah, he had some rules, but by that time, what was he, 18, 19 when he did that? Maybe somewhere between 17 and 19. But he loved Carl. We all loved Carl, even though he was a brat. He was also very lovable. If you met people, I can think of somebody right now, a kid of one of our people in the church who isn't around anymore, just lovable as he can be and as not as he can be, you know, and cute as he can be. And you love him, no matter what, you love him. But you know when somebody needs a heart change, okay? The reason I slowed down and described that to you, can you imagine, because the Lord touched your heart with love, that you adopt 3 children, and the first little adorable, curly-haired, blue-eyed, precious boy that loved to work with Dad in the dairy, hard worker, loved my dad, except he didn't want Dad to tell him what to do. That was a touchy point there. But just what that feels like to think, and I do believe they did the will of God when they adopted us, but to do that and then have somebody in the house who is unholy and messes up the atmosphere for everybody. And then Daddy goes to church, and Carl never joined the church, and they decided a particular Sunday to, what's that word, excommunicate him. Dad and I are sitting like in the second row at First Byron Center Christian Reformed Church, and they go to the back of the Psalter hymnal and go through the excommunication ceremony. Daddy didn't even know it was going to happen that day. Dad cried through the whole service. I cried through the whole service. Carl could give a toot what they said about him. He didn't care. He never did join the church. He never made profession of faith. I can't imagine. Why are you excommunicating somebody that never joined in the first place? At any rate, it made, if there was sorrow in our household, it was over sins of the kids. Dad and Mom loved each other. I never saw them fight. Ever. Ever, ever, ever. You know that song, where never is heard a discouraging word and the skies are not cloudy all day? That was Mom and Dad's relationship, for real, for real, for real. And the older I got, the more I scrutinized that and tried to figure out how could that be. But my dad was orphaned, and my mom had a big family, and he was so grateful to be a part of a family. He was just happy as a clam with my mom. He really was. But us kids, one by one, made for some treacherous moments for their hearts, because we were not walking in holiness. We were not walking the way they taught us and prayed for us. And I say that even so you tell other young people, do you have any clue? It's not just your life that your unholiness is affecting. The only blotch and grief in the household is the sin you bring in it. That's the only, in our household, I can say that for a fact. The only grief in our household was the sin us kids managed to do one by one. Not consecutively, not simultaneously. That was nice, huh? We just did it consecutively. I got out before I really started to act out, because I had this policy like my son has. If you're going to act like an idiot, don't do it in your parents' house. I had that philosophy. Get out of their face. Don't do outrageous. But I had some attitudes that weren't good. And I'm just saying, unholiness, wickedness makes for perilous times. Think about it. Think about it. Think about any home, any Christian home that you know began to be a sad place. It's invariably, it could be sickness, but if everybody's righteous, there's a peace. But when there's sin involved, think about it. It brings in perilous times. It really does. I could testify more about situations I've lived in, but I'm going to move on to the next ones, lest this become a book in its own right. Without natural affection. You know what? To be perfectly frank, I used to think that referred to perverse sexuality. It seems now to me more like the word itself is storgus, and storgus is like a human affection, family, friends, It's not necessarily unnatural affections replacing the natural ones, which I always thought, but I began to dig a little deeper this time. They're like almost inhuman. Have you ever met somebody like that? I've seen movies, biographies or whatever, of people that encountered, say, authority, that they will tell them what they're going through, and the person just keeps repeating the law or the policy on something that should merit a deviation because of the circumstances, but there's no affection. They're robotic, and they just repeat the rule coldly. Some people have had experiences like that with the natural law, the police law. Police people have had experience like that, like, ma'am, get out of the car. I'm on my way, my daughter and my husband might, whatever. No, and some people might get a police escort, and somebody else might get a ticket. When we have natural affection, we don't just go by the book. We go by, we ask the Lord, what's going on here? And we show human affection, and we make exceptions. If we discern that it merits, the situation merits it, our hearts warm, and then we realize, no, this one doesn't. That's what happened to me at Light Force when I felt so guilty all week because my little friend had asked me, could I buy him some water, a bottle of water. Guy in a wheelchair. I miss him now. I don't know what happened to him. I miss him. And I had a rule for the whole group. Don't give people stuff because they'll all want to talk to us because they'll say that group will give you something. And we're not here for that. There's plenty of missions that do that. But that particular no on my behalf, because I'm like, well, I can't break the rule. I told everybody else to keep it, and I'm going to go run get him a bottle of water. If it were Sunday I could, but while we were officially doing the thing, I had made that rule, and all week I felt horrible. I felt that's one time I should have broken that rule and got him some water. I just felt like I missed it. So next time I was down there, thank God, he was like, because I apologized, and I said it's bothered me all week. And he never did take advantage of that confession or anything. He never did act like, oh, now I can ask her for more. He did not do that to me. Thank you, Jesus. But that's a situation where I didn't let natural affection change my hard and fast rule when I should have. So I know what that feels like to say, no, I can't break this rule because I told them to keep this rule. So if I break this rule, that's hypocritical. I was just in a quandary. But you know what it means to be cold when you know you ought to be feeling something. That's part of perilous times, to be around people that you think, well, surely if they find out what I'm going through, they'll make an exception. And you're not being manipulative, it's the truth. And every other time you do it by the book, but this time you forgot that piece of paper or this or that, or you didn't have it on the exact right this, that, or other. But the situation is intense, and love demands giving somebody a break. But if they're without natural affection, that love is not there to appeal to. Don't you feel wonderful when you meet strangers that are kind and have natural affection? That's the opposite of perilous. It's receiving and welcoming. You feel like the whole world is your living room. I told you this story about when I broke my wrist and my elbow, or whatever all I broke. Do you remember? When I fell right next to that hole in the ground, that was the 9/11 ground zero. And I drove home. But in the process of not being able to start the car and asking strangers, would you do me a favor? Or going to the store and having a lady come up to me, seeing I was struggling with, and I didn't have a cast on or anything, so she literally went to the buffet thing and got a plastic, it was part of a grocery store thing, plastic fork and a plastic spoon and all that, and she sat down with me, had a kid in the push cart, and she proceeded to cut up my meat for me. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. I walk out the door, cut up my meat for me. She saw I was struggling, and I'm alone, and she cut up my meat. I go out the door, and I say to a middle-aged, he was a white dude, happened to be a white dude, just to assure none of y'all I was trying to hit on him, because well, Robert said don't say that anymore. Anyway, I wouldn't anyway, I'm just saying. But I said to that guy, he looked respectable, and I said, can I ask you a favor? Yeah, anything. And he was sincere. He didn't know me. For all he knew, I was going to ask him for $50 and this and that and the other. I said, my arm hurts too. Both my hand, the other hand was, I said, could you start my car for me? I said, I can take it from there, but I need the car started. And he just cheerfully did it, got in, started my big old green van, got out. I was on my way. When I went to the drugstore, and this killed my prejudice, because I'm hurting so bad, I go to the pharmacist, and it was a Muslim lady with a burqa on. And I have never related, as far as I can remember, I didn't have any welfare clients that wore burqas. I've never related face-to-face in a eye-to-eye conversation of any depth with a Muslim woman with a burqa on and had an attitude about what they think of us. You understand what I'm saying? And this woman looked at me with such love and such kindness. So I was asking her for one of those brown things to wrap around me. She goes, you don't need one of those. You need to go right to emergency. That looks broken. And she said it like she was my mom or something. She was younger than me. She said it like she was my mom, and she was so precious. I felt like I was meeting up with angels or something during that particular time, because everybody was so kind and so loving. It was just the opposite of perilous times. I'm in New York City and then New Jersey in these instances. And you hear things about New York City, and the nearby, just across the bridge, New Jersey. Whoever you're talking about, you world, that wasn't my experience. I felt as loved as I often do right here. And that human kindness, that affection, when you see somebody in need, when you're the recipient of it, you feel so safe and so loved and so protected. I felt from there on in like anybody that I asked to start my car, I could trust. There was one situation where, I was sleeping in the back of the car too. I'd alternate nights, hotel, back of car, driving home with my one hand. And just one rest stop, I felt a slight sense of not safe. Just one, but nobody bore it out. It just felt like an atmosphere, which feels kind of treacherous. When you think, where am I? It doesn't feel like a good atmosphere right here. But that only one time. Anyway, natural affection. Okay, remember I said in the introduction, this is what makes times perilous. This is what makes times good. When people are unloving and cold and go by the book and don't care about anything, okay? I want you to look at every one of these phrases and say, how can I make my environment be kind and loving and caring and warm and protective and here, right here, anybody that walks in the door. And I know that over the last 40 years, we've picked up some weird folk. I'm not talking about they're here right now. I'm saying that have come and gone. I mean, some really off the wall. But still, it's our job. We can be firm. We can say, we don't allow that here. We don't do that here. You don't hit on our boys. Furthermore, you've done it enough that you need to go away, sir, until you learn not to do that. We can't tolerate some things, but we were always kind. And we have to keep being kind and have true affection and care about this person that could well be headed for hell. And we're here to do what Jesus did, seek and save that which is lost. And it hurts us to our heart when we have to deal with anybody, but we can't set up an atmosphere that's perilous either. Anybody have anything to say while I'm saying all this? You tracking with me? Okay, go ahead. Who's?
I was just, when you said without natural affection, I was thinking of my sister-in-law, Brendolyn. She was married to a narcissist. And so he could act when he needed to, like there was affection, but there was no affection. He had no connection with anyone in his family.
That's
and I was
perilous.
Like, that's
very perilous. Then you really have to get close to the Lord, because the Lord is the epitome of affection. He will hold you and love on you, and you just have to, what you should have been able to get from your spouse, but can't, you have to cuddle up with Jesus in your heart. You really do. Truce breakers. Truce breakers. You know what a truce is? It's an agreement to stop hostilities. You might not be all happy with the person you're agreeing to do that with, but you both agree, this is not good for anybody. We're going to stop acting on our hostilities. And some truces are for a stated season in order to have conferences to try to iron things out. Of course, if we hear of that, we should always be praying for that they're ironed out before they go back into their war, so that the ceasefire is permanent. But a truce breaker is one that cannot wait through that truce. They can't. They rush back to the violence. They rush back to the killing. They rush back to the hurt. They do not want peace. And the other definition that was in the Strong's was implacable. You can't please them. You're in a conference about, well, how can we make this peace treaty permanent? And no matter what you bring to the table, they really have so much hatred, they just want to erase you. They don't want peace. That's perilous. It's very perilous. Right now with Putin, it sounds, see, we probably don't know half of anything right now that's going on. We read the news writes what it writes, we really don't know. But the way it looks is that Putin is saying, somebody prophesied that, Mark Sharona, years ago, that Russia's going to want her cubs back. In other words, one by one, get the Soviet Union back in place. It was years ago, and that resonated with me. And I sort of feel that way about this. Let's get Ukraine back, the territory back. And it's almost like I don't care if we kill every person in your country. We want the land. We want the resources. And what's the, where's the treaty? Where's the truce? And it's all about, we want this land. There's no peace without us getting this back, period. They had that before, right? As part of the Soviet Union. And I have never felt that Soviet Union was at peace with dismantling. I've never felt that. I've always felt that one day those stumps are going to smell the smell of water and new life. I'm speaking in a natural sense analogy of getting back what was, and we can return to our former glory kind of thing. You know, so it's like you can make a truce with, okay, Palestinians, same thing. They want Israel off the map. Iran, death to the great Satan, that would be us, and the little Satan, that would be Israel. There's no believing a truce when the ultimate goal is wipe Israel off the map. Where's a truce in that? Okay, we'll sell our friends down the river and help you with this because we want peace at any price. No, they're implacable. Implacable. I think Putin's implacable. And I think the Palestinians, I don't know about all the, you know what, I'm going to reword that. I think the leadership is implacable. I'm not sure what all the individual people would be willing to do left up to them. You understand? A lot of times young people can all become friends when they live in close proximity, and then they're taught this is the enemy, but it wouldn't be their own choosing to call them enemies. You know what I'm saying? But the leadership, Arafat, tossed money at that man like there was no tomorrow. But there was no real truce, give and take. Just give me some more millions. No accountability. Don't hold him to account. But that's perilous if you're dealing with somebody that you can't make any covenant with. You can't make a truce with. You can't trust them. Speaking of narcissism, my way or the highway, end of story. Implacable. We can't be like that. We have to think as much as we can of what godly concessions can we make if we're at odds with somebody. What godly concessions, what things really don't matter that much that we have to have our way, that we can begin to give and take and be at peace with somebody. But you might meet up with somebody, you find out like they're like that. There's no deal making with people that are just plain perilous and evil. You know that, right? Now this one, I've got like 10 minutes, 12 minutes left, or 10 minutes, because Robert's going to want to close out. But this one I spent a whole lot of time studying, because the actual word is diabolos, like diabolic, diabolos, and that's false accusers. And this is something that gets real tricky, because we're quick to repeat. I just repeated something bad about Putin. I prefaced it by saying, we really don't know all the ins and outs of what's going on there. This is what it looks like, and if that's true, then this, okay? Because false accusers say things about other people as if they're true, for sure, and in the process, we might boycott their business. During a time when this guy was going around, what was his name, Robert? That guy that we were all listening to, Todd somebody. Anyway, this guy was saying all kinds of accusatory things about all kinds of businesses and involved in witchcraft and involved in this and involved in that. And so we're like, well, we got to boycott this and we got to boycott. Then after a while, I figured, you know what? Forget that mess. We're going to be in the world among gas stations and department stores, and I'm not going to shoot myself in the foot having to find some obscure something that's totally above reproach and doesn't do a thing wrong, because that's the only people I can buy from. I don't think Jesus and his disciples, if they went and bought some bread, analyzed the behavior of the bakery owner, the bakery people. I think we all just get the gas and move on and pray for the people and witness when we can. But anyway, he did that, and after a while, he had so many accusations that one day I was at his mom and dad's breakfast table, and I looked outside, and the the flowers were climbing up the fence, and I looked at the pattern in that 4 o'clock flower, and I said, oh, that's a witchcraft symbol, until I thought, this is insane. That's a flower. God created that flower. But inside was a pattern that people had identified as one of the, and then that kind of snapped me out of the foolishness of it all. This was maybe 1977 or so that this, John Todd, that was his name, John Todd. He later was exposed to have been not exactly, just like that other guy, the Satan seller Warnock, was exposed to be not what he was saying he was. But anyway, diabolists, that's slanderers. And Satan's biggest job, first he slanders you to you, right? He slanders you to you. Look at you, hypocrite. Look at you telling other people this, and look at you, you're doing the same thing. It's the same principle. Look at you, look at you. He points fingers, and then he points fingers at other people. Points fingers at other people. And then we say things like, we need to pray for so-and-so because it seems like he's such and so. And just those words might be false accuser, slandering. Go ahead, Rebecca. The mic person's right next to you.
The American Standard says malicious gossipers.
Malicious gossipers. There are people, Christians, who when they see somebody that seems high and mighty to them, that's the first terminology came to my mind, seems like they're really something special, they'll literally say, is there any dirt on them? Can we get the dirt on them? Because they can't quite tolerate that. Maybe somebody for a while enjoys the blessing of an excellent reputation and seems to be beloved by everybody, so they want to find something to knock them down to size. That happens in church. That's diabolical. God help me, God help you, God help all of us. Because it's a habit after a while to point fingers at other people. I don't know if it just makes us feel so much more righteous, but actually, as I was looking through all these sins, I was thinking, good night, that's the only one that literally has the devil's name inside of it. Diabolical. You know? It's, you know, we talk about some sins as if they're the worst, but I really started to meditate on gossip and slander, and I thought about how the Jews say when you defame somebody's reputation, it's the same as murder. You've murdered them. Why? Because say their life purpose, like Colonel Sanders, he's going to leave a legacy of finger-licking good. Good service, pretty consistent, good food. You can go there and have a whole big meal that you take to your friends and be pretty assured it's going to be excellent. It's rare that Colonel Sanders' chicken is a disappointment. It's different than you expected it to be. Also, my experience at the window has almost, or inside has almost always been, in fact, I can't think of anything bad right now, just kind, hospitable. Okay, not long ago, the last time, I don't know what's the date that Kristallnacht. You know what Kristallnacht is? It's the night that started the whole persecution against the Jews in Germany. The Nazis went around crashing glass windows, so they call it Kristallnacht. I think crystal is glass or something. Well, Colonel Sanders' computer system, even if it's an ethnic holiday, say it's, I'm making this part up, but that was my imagination, say it's Cinco de Mayo, then the computer can generate a letter to all the Hispanic in the area saying, it's your special time, come celebrate, we'll toss in a free thing of fries or whatever. Well, they did something like that on accident. They had programmed their computer to get all the ethnic holidays, and that stupid computer got a program that apparently nobody, you know, I mean, you wouldn't want Day of the Dead in Mexico to have a special congratulations. Well, nor would you want Kristallnacht. But in this situation, Kristallnacht came up, and the Germans in Germany got a letter, congratulations on your special holiday. And you know what? Have you ever proofread some of your messages before you send it, and thank God you did? Because some of the things the computer has said are horrific. If I would have left it without correcting it. The computer did that. I'm watching the clock too, Robert. And in that case, immediately when the owners found out about it, They issued a huge apology. It explained the situation, but not before some guy in his email who has a blog that people follow in the world's worst marketing blunder of the month, KFC in Germany reportedly sent out a push notification offering customers special chicken deals for Kristallnacht before sending out another message apologizing. Absolutely hideous. Now I'm looking at Daniel saying, what if your computer made a mistake like that? And it wasn't your heart at all to do something that ridiculous. Do you want somebody to immediately assume you don't mean the apology? Do you want Colonel Sanders to go out of business? Which if they did that genuinely, they would go out of business with a whole lot of Jews around the world. If they had sincere, it's like congratulating the Klan on something. Worse, because the Klan, as far as I know, didn't have concentration camps. And it's like, that to me is the height of slander. When the person recognizes their mistake, they sincerely apologize, but you will not let them off the hook, and you want to keep talking trash about them. Absolutely hideous. In England, I'm winding down. In England, 2 instances have occurred within the last 6 weeks or so, where one person, as a part of the Windsor group in the palace, whatever, the Queen's entourage, she's gone now, King Charles, whatever, said when Meghan Markle was pregnant, I wonder what color the baby will be. Now that could be some racist saying, oh, I hope it isn't real dark and people, whatever. That could be some ignorant racist, I don't know. But it was immediately assumed that was a racist remark. And what if I say with a brown-eyed man and a blue-eyed person, I wonder if the kid's eyes will be hazel. It wouldn't occur to you in a million years that there was anything downing about that. When I was pregnant, it crossed my mind, wondering, is he going to look like a white kid, a black kid, or a medium kid? You know, you wonder, what is my baby going to look like? That's very normal. There's nothing racist about that. But in England, I think that lady stepped down. Did you hear about this instance that happened? Did you read about that? Nobody else? I'm the only one reading this, John Carr. Huh? Okay. And then this other lady was talking to some, now I'm going to imagine he was African because they immediately said that was racist. And I do this all the time. I'll be talking to somebody with an accent and I'm like, that's not an American accent. That sounds like a Dutch brogue because I was raised with that. I said, where are you from? New York City. I could easily say, where are you really from? Because I'm recognizing a Dutch brogue that I was raised with, and I've learned to love that brogue because it reminds me of home. And I'm just curious if the guy's from the Netherlands. Now, apparently the person, the lady at the Windsor group said it to was a black person, and all of a sudden it's racist because I'm like, you look like my friend's from Rwanda. I wonder if he's from Rwanda. Because you start to go, Ethiopians have these noses, you know, have a certain look. People from Rwanda, and I was right the other day. I said, you guys from Rwanda? Yeah. And I think it's fun to try to guess which part of Africa they're from. That's just fun to me. But oh no, this lady in England asked somebody that, and now she stepped down. She was one of those boys, William's or Harry's godmother. But oh, how awful. Where are you really from? You know, they got a brogue, they got an accent, they sound like Ireland. Wonder if they are from Ireland. Wonder if they're Scottish. How close? I'm curious. I'm still a social worker inside to some degree. But I'm looking at, okay, why am I bringing this up with slander? Because to me, they're the accusers. They're the ones prejudging, assuming if you ask, oh, I wonder what the baby will look like. I wonder if it'll be dark or light or white. I mean, I've seen babies come out of mixed couples that you can't even tell they're from a mixed couple. And I'm like, that was a waste of energy trying to get a little tan kid. You know, I mean, that's my personal perspective. I think E.G.'s got a beautiful face and complexion, handsome. But I'm just saying, don't assume bad about people. That's diabolical. Don't assume if I say thus and so, that means I'm a racist. Don't assume that. That is naughty. That's just naughty. I mean, that particularly hits close to home because after the Trump election, I became racist to a whole lot of my relatives. Well, 5 of them maybe, not the whole lot of them. But that's hurtful when somebody slanders you and you know it's not true. I'm not a racist because I don't want abortion on the docket or because I don't want free borders. That doesn't make me a racist. He was the only one thinking like that. We didn't have an alternative. That's all we had. So therefore, but it's like this Sunshine dude. What was his name that I told you about just now? He's Colonel Sanders' group could apologize all they want, but he's saying that's terrible. They apologized. They made a mistake. The computer made a mistake. They're going to fix it. But slander, the devil wants, I'll tell you something, I'm quitting, I honestly am, but I want to share this so that you notice this. In the world, they think once a thief, always a thief. Once a liar, always a liar. Once a pervert, always a pervert. They think, the world says people can't change. And God's word says, once you were one of those people, but now you've been washed by the blood of Jesus. In the word, we rejoice when we change. In the world, people want to shove you down and keep you down. You understand that? And you know who's behind that? The devil. Kill, steal, destroy. If he's done a hit, he wants those results to remain forever, and he hates it when other people say, oh yeah, he's working for me now. That was 20 years ago. He did his time. He came out better than ever. God saved him. He's a man of God now. It's the devil that wants to slander, and it's God who wants to redeem and give us an abundant life. And this ought to convict us if we're tempted to gossip. Oh, there's so much I want to, I'll tell you more later about this topic because I've got more on it. But have you noticed lately that anybody that gets to any kind of renown and possible effectiveness, everybody wants to gather, circle around and pull him down and hurt him and destroy him or her and gossip and slander and tell lies about him. Say what? The cancel culture, right. In fact, I read one guy that said, I'm beginning to see that everybody that the news hates are people that I like. What's going on? You know, he might have been exaggerating, but I thought I've noted that little phenomenon too. Okay, I quit, even though I have so much more to share and can't share again until next week.